All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Packed house today. Thank you so much for coming. We've got a great panel today, and I think it shows with the crowd that's here. So thank you again. I'm Nate Phillips. I'm with Chapman Properties. I'm also a NAIOP chapter president. Thank you again all for being here for the October chapter meeting regarding opportunity zones. We are going to make some quick announcements this morning and then get an advocacy update prior to bringing the panel up. We actually put out a member survey recently, and many of you responded that you'd like to hear more about our advocacy efforts. And so we're going to do that this morning and try to keep you more apprised of the issues that we're tackling on the day-to-day on behalf of membership. Thank you so much to our gavel sponsors. As always, without your support, this breakfast is not possible. Looks like we're cruising through. Information on the PAC to support to amplify your voice in our advocacy efforts. There's a QR code at your table. We appreciate your contributions. Schedule of events. So we've got our chapter breakfast next month. More announcements coming on that here shortly. Night at the Fights, and we've got a DL Project Series tour. So the project tour is the November 5th. Newberry Apartments. Looking forward to seeing a nice multifamily project. Night at the Fights is sold out. It's a great event. We limited tickets this year because of feedback we got last year. You all bought up tickets quickly, and thank you to those sponsors that are supporting the event. Come and enjoy the event and burn your clothes afterwards. NAIOP holiday parties, December 3rd. This is our annual meeting, so it is limited to members only. Looking forward to that event and celebrating with all of you. Information on membership, obviously, you know where the website is. If you're here as a guest, we encourage you to consider joining. Lastly, in January, please note the date of the State of the Economy breakfast. That's a joint breakfast with BOMA, always very well attended, and that one does tend to sell out because of the fact that it's a joint event. So before I introduce the panel, let's bring up David Caligiuri from C&G Strategies to bring you up to speed on some of our advocacy efforts. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Good. What a polite applause. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So as our esteemed board chair recognized, I'm Dave Caligiuri from C&G Strategies. And for those of you that don't know, we are your lobbying firm / advocacy group. So if you have any questions or concerns regarding any of the issues that we talk about today or any other issues that affect your business, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to talk and see what we can do to make things right. So I'll try to be brief. As it relates to the federal government, there is a shutdown, so there's really not much to say about that. Maybe you should go find all the gold that your grandmother gave you and sell it, because apparently gold is the way to go these days. State government. So there's no state budget either, which is a bad trend that we're finding ourselves in. But I wanted to let you know that the board and we are working on energy policy so that with the influx of data centers and just generally, as you folks know, finding it so difficult to find power and to get it to your projects in a timely manner. So we're working on some legislation in Harrisburg right now. We're drafting it. That'll make that a little bit easier and more efficient. So we'll keep you up to date as that process moves along. With the county, we're just waiting on a reassessment. So we'll keep you posted as to how that plays out. And finally with the city, which first, actually, let me introduce some of our elected officials who are here today. So from the governor's office, we have Laura Sahinki. Laura, thank you for coming. Everybody knows our board member, Lauren Connelly, who is the county's economic development coordinator. Lauren. And on city council, we have Councilman Bob Charlin, Councilman Bobby Wilson, and Councilwoman Erica Strausberger and her chief of staff, Scott McCurdy. Now, let's give those guys a big round of applause. And if you haven't read the paper or if you've been living under a rock lately, maybe you missed that yesterday the mayor's inclusionary zoning policy which was, I think, a signature piece of his tenure in office, I think is effectively dead, which from our perspective is a good thing. And we really owe Erica and these three folks a debt of gratitude, because they, I don't know if anyone witnessed the city council hearing yesterday, and I really hope you didn't, because it was a 4-hour slog that Erica had to endure, and the rest of these guys. And it got a little personal, and it got a little nasty. And I think as part of the development community here, we need to remind everybody that this is not about race. This is literally about making projects work and making projects pencil out so that we can create more housing for everyone, not just the rich, and we're working on that. And so these guys did a phenomenal job. We've been working on that for, I think, with Bob Charlin's original piece of legislation maybe a year ago, and so it paid off. And so just to let you know, that's part of what we're doing here with NAIOP and with our firm and the advocacy that we do. So kudos to you guys. Thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, I'll be here. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Great.
I'd also want to recognize our executive director, Tom Frank, who really did yeoman's work in pulling together a lot of resources. This effort's been primarily about educating. There's a lot of bad data out there. I think we had to make 2 phone calls to find out that some of the projects that were being used to support IZ were either dead or not market rate projects at all. So unfortunately, that's the fight that we're fighting, and this association serves to help educate. And kudos to Tom, and thanks to Tom for all of his hard work in helping to educate not just our elected officials, but also the public. Thanks, Tom. All right, with that, why don't we start the panel? I'll ask Bill and our guests to come up onto the stage. For those of you that don't know Bill Hunt, our moderator, he's a past chapter president. He's president of Elmhurst Group, a longtime, well-respected developer here in the Pittsburgh region. He's been a mentor to me personally and many of the people in the room through our DL mentorship program, and he's a pretty stand-up guy. So please welcome everyone to the stage.
Okay, you hear me? Okay, good. No, thank you, Nate. And I just want to, real quick beforehand, as someone who's been involved in NAIOP for a very long time and locally as well, I attended the strategic planning session that the board had about maybe a month ago. And I just want to mention how impressed I was, how engaged this chapter is, certainly, particularly at the leadership level. I've been so involved. I remember there were times where people discussed how much coffee we need at the chapter meetings and other items that just are not relevant. It was all about, advocacy and how do we get more members and all the right aspects. So the chapter is really in a great place, and that has to do with the leadership, and I want to compliment everyone. So we have a great panel here, and I'm going to ask each one. Maybe I'll go down the list. We have Melissa Wright from, she is unfortunately not here, not for a lack of wanting to be here, but for a lack of a budget. And so because of the state, but she'll be engaged, and we're obviously very pleased that she could be here. So maybe, Melissa, you could introduce yourself, and then we'll go through the panel here. Maybe 1 or 2 sentences, and then we'll keep moving.
Yeah, sounds great. Good morning, everyone. As was mentioned, apologies for not being there in person. Happy to make another visit when there is a budget and we're able to travel. But my name is Melissa Wright. I serve as the Executive Policy Director for the Department of Community and Economic Development. My portfolio spans everything DCED covers, from business attraction, retention, economic development, to tourism, and making sure that we're marketing the state in all ways, shapes, and forms. As part of that, I've been working on our housing action plan. And I'm just happy to be here. I'm looking forward to the panel.
Great, thank you. Okay, Laura?
Good morning, nice to be with you all. I'm Lauren Connelly. I'm the Director of Economic Development for Allegheny County. So we are a multidisciplinary agency at a macro level. We're working to build a more inclusive, diverse, globally competitive regional economy. And that means creating vibrant, connected communities that offer a high quality of life in each of the 130 municipalities in Allegheny County. We do that through planning, housing investment, business investment, site development, municipal infrastructure work, and we are actually staffed to 6 county authorities, including the Redevelopment Authority of Allegheny County. So thank you.
I'm Eric Schmutz. I'm the Senior Director of Federal Affairs for NAIOP in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Bill Palmer. I'm with SunCap Property Group. I lead our debt and equity capitalization efforts, somewhat on the industrial side, and then have a leadership role on our multifamily side, driving operations and strategy for that vertical as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. All right. So we actually have a sort of a 3-tiered aspect to this meeting. And so the first one, obviously, is we're going to talk about the opportunity zones and the challenges and going forward and the opportunities that we have here with our second iteration. I'll touch on a little bit of a background with that. And then the panel is going to discuss the opportunities that are out there with the new legislations, whether they be at the county, state, and the federal that impact positively and negatively, of course, the real estate industry, so something we all should be aware of. And then the third, and probably maybe arguably the most important, is that, it's open discussion, and it's important for all of us to think about, is how can the real estate industry and NAIOP chapter here particularly, and nationally as well, but be an asset for public officials, and how can we be there? Very similar to what occurred and what Nate was discussing, and David regarding the inclusionary zoning. Sometimes we're not here to push specific agendas that help 1 or 2 developers. We're here to grow the region, and we're here to make everything better, and we want to be a part of that. And so a great example is the timing here. It's almost in real time, is with the opportunity zones. And so let me give a little bit of background for those that have been involved or know about opportunity zones. But the first was in the first legislation came out about, we'll call it 1.0, came out in 2017. And it was where that investors who have capital gains, and this is all at the federal level, whether they sell their businesses, their privately held businesses, certain securities. It doesn't have to be a real estate sale. So it's very different than, say, a 1021 like-kind exchange where it's only real estate people. So, in fact, it's an opportunity for investors who are never been invested in real estate to potentially say, I sold my business, I want to have a tax deferral, and how that would out. So they suddenly could have the ability to put new capital into real estate, which they may not have thought of. So again, 2017, it was a great opportunity to be out there for the real estate industry. If you have the capital gains is in for 5 years, it's invested in a specific zone, and we'll talk in a minute about how that gets decided. Then it can be deferred for 5 years, and if you have it for 10 years, it can actually be abated for the entire. So there's great advantages going forward. So having said that, the legislation would be going through the end of this year, or end of next year rather. That's the 1.0. In the last bill that came out this summer, the federal bill, there's a 2.0, and it has, again, very similar. There's a little bit of a tighter, and I won't go through all the specifics, but the opportunity zones have they're tied to certain poverty rates and household incomes, percentage of household incomes, and obviously it was designed to create developments in these areas. Many regions around the country in 1.0, and Florida particularly, really took advantage of that. And they took areas where they found opportunities in adjacent properties and sites where it was more about future growth and the ability for when they made this selection. And the other aspect of it was in say, again, Florida and some of the high growth areas where we sort of had a challenge is that it's tied to the original census tract. And so in 2017, the census tract was in 2010, of course, the prior census. The large growth, high growth areas had the ability to, the gentrified areas because of the increase, improved dramatically. So we've had somewhat of a setback, I thought, last time around in 2017, and we want to make sure that going forward, we have the right abilities to go forward. So with that, I'm going to sort of walk through, if I could, let me just finish one more thing here. We want to make sure that as a region that we have a plan, and that the timing now is the 2.0. The governor selects, from the state level, the governor selects the sites with the help, certainly, hopefully, of NAIOP, and again, we're going to discuss that, of where the locations in western Pennsylvania. And the implementation would be in early 2027. So we are, so as I mentioned, in real time at this point. And so we want to be at the table. And so that's what's great about having the panel here from the county and the state and obviously the NAIOP National. And then Bill's going to discuss some of his examples of what he's seen that has worked in other cities, other regions, and maybe what could happen here as well. So I'll just wrap up by saying I had a personal example of this, and this is one of the reasons why I'm very passionate about it. My company had another business that we operated in down in the southeast. It was an electronic security business. We sold in 2019. Our investors had capital gains. We said to them, this is terrific. We have a real estate at Elmhurst. We have a real estate group that we can find sites in western Pennsylvania that we could use for opportunity zones. And we had real challenges, and it was very difficult. And so unfortunately, we finally did find a site, but that was really through sort of certain connections on Neville Island. But we really discovered firsthand that our region during 1.0 had major difficulties on the sort of where it was more selected on, there were smaller sites, there were sites that were undermined, sellers weren't interested in selling. The other final one was Hazelwood Green, which was an opportunity zone. A great site is now being developed, but at that point in time they had just switched developers, and a national developer came in and was not interested in talking to others at that point. They wanted to replan. So we'd like to be proactive, hopefully, with 2.0 and moving forward. So why don't we pass it over to, actually, why don't we do Bill? Maybe you could talk a little bit about your experiences, and then maybe we'll go to the national and then the state and then the county. So, Bill?
That works. Yeah, so in a previous firm, I did execute 2 opportunity zone deals down in Nashville, and then with SunCap, we recently closed an opportunity zone project down in Greenville, South Carolina. It is a little bit different executing at the start of the program versus kind of the tail end. You see a lot of different areas because those census tracts have really matured, particularly in areas that did receive a decent amount of investment over this period of time. Interested to see how that tracks with the next program. But I think the biggest piece to keep in mind with the opportunity zones is that unlike a grant or a tax abatement, it really doesn't help your underwriting. So it's not going to make a deal work at the end of the day. The deal still needs to pencil, and the location still needs to pencil because of that. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to, does your deal work on its face? But the OZ designation does help you raise that capital. So, when groups are out there in a difficult capital raising environment, as we've gone through over the past few years, so everybody's aware, that was a key factor in allowing us to help capitalize that project. We look at it more as an incentive to help us raise capital as opposed to a designation that really makes a deal work. Taking that into kind of where the sites are designated is a big piece. So, those locations, as Bill alluded to, really need to work on their face and be ripe for development at the start, but it does help spur faster growth in those areas. And a byproduct of that is some growth outside of that specific designated area as well. Just speaking to some of the locations, generally in some other markets, the focus really was on developable areas that had been a focus in the previous years, the years preceding the OZ designation, and they were true path of progress. So adjacent to areas that had recently gone through a development phase to continue to expand that developing area. Other states, the path of progress. I know Cleveland's a great example. A large portion of downtown Cleveland was an OZ, designated OZ, which helped spur some development there. So I think, and the other piece is just the universities. So universities seem to end up being a good hub for some of this development to come in and grow. Obviously, those generally qualify because of the income ratios in those areas. Certain universities as opposed to others, but in some other states, we did see a lot of focus and development around some universities that did qualify because you did have that base of, the economic base of that university to allow for those deals to pencil and then expand out from there. So again, I think the main point is that it doesn't help a deal work, it doesn't help a deal pencil, but it does help you raise capital and helps to spur that development a little bit faster.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, and I think there are also some states that added local tax incentives on top to leverage. And again, it's all about more and more opportunities of bringing outside capital in. We're competing against other regions with other opportunity zones. So, good. Eric, on the national level, do you want to talk a little bit about the program and where we are?
Yeah, I think to kind of give me a pretty good segue on that, one of the things we've found is that states that did coordinate their local incentives with the federal law were actually the most received the biggest benefit out of it. Particularly the interesting thing about this reconciliation bill and changing the tax law was that it is so many of these provisions are permanent. Historically, federal government lives in 5 or 10-year budget cycles, and if on the 11th year or the 6th year, it doesn't even exist anymore. It goes back to the original baseline law. So making these tax provisions permanent was a pretty big lift and really kind of changed the dynamics in Washington. I think it's good for you all and making the decisions because you're not dealing with that 4-year, 5-year deadline for this program to end. And so that's a big part of this. I would say that one of the things that keeps coming up in conversations that we have amongst kind of my colleagues in the other industry groups is that we need to remind you of the reporting requirements that are in the bill. It's much more, the reporting requirements are much stricter this time than previously. So when you get into compliance, make sure you're aware of that. And then I think the rest of it, you've kind of all touched on the issues from the federal perspective.
It's not completely complicated, but you certainly need a lawyer, and you set up
definitely.
certain funds,
Right.
and I suspect there's several lawyers here that could help you out at the door as you would leave here. So,
Every time a tax law is passed, lawyers and accountants make more money. So,
yes, not a coincidence. Maybe Melissa, maybe you could update. Actually, real quick too. Sorry, I should mention on your table they have a QR code, and so questions we're going to vet. That doesn't work.
QR code's on the screen. That's a different one.
Sorry, that's a different one. Sorry, up on the screen. So just use your phone, thank you. And for any questions, and we'll have that, obviously, a Q&A at the end. Melissa, maybe you could help us walk through a little bit of the timing in this year coming up in 2026 and the selection process and some of the goals for the state.
Yeah, happy to do that. So right now, we're currently waiting on the official list of census tracts from the Treasury Department. We do have a list of rural tracts, but we don't have the full map. We're currently using some best guesses based on our own mapping and what some of the experts have put out to kind of get a little bit ahead of the game and then adjust once that official map is out. We anticipated initially that map would be out in November, and we would be able to kind of put that out to counties. One nice thing that I don't know that has been mentioned about this 2.0 versus 1.0 is it's a much longer runway to kind of go through this designation process. So we're really trying to be thoughtful, to be data informed and really strategic about how we're doing this as opposed to 1.0 where we did have some of those things, but just not quite as long a runway and timeline to do it. So that being said, looking at some of the tracks that are eligible right now and thinking about how we leverage those most strongly. So we are thinking a lot about grading and stocking of funds, how we get the most impact out of sites to make sure that they're actually usable. About 1 in 4 sites with 1.0 or tracks that were designated did not actually receive any investment based on the best data that we have nationally. So we're trying to use the data. We're thinking about our PA sites applications, where folks are already interested in building, overlaying those against eligible tracks, figuring out which ones make sense to designate. Folks already have anticipation of building there. We do have a plan to reach out to counties with their eligible tracks, get their feedback as well. So it's great that the county is in the room. Please continue to communicate with them about places where you think that there are opportunities as well. And then we're also thinking about how do we align this with other priorities of the Commonwealth, including housing, or particularly our housing action plan will be rolling out shortly after the budget is passed. So those are some of the priorities. And then the other thing, I know we mentioned it really quickly, is two things actually. One is also in terms of stacking. Where are the places where there is municipal backing, both in terms of like additional incentives and a readiness to accept funding, to be able to build, et cetera. And then I think the last piece that I would focus on, I just lost it. So I guess those would be the things that I would highlight as I got it. Rural. There is a really significant rural incentive, right? Additional step up, and as well as a lower improvement threshold. So that's something that we can't ignore this time around, is just thinking about how we bring some of those rural tracks into the fold and invite investment into those places as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. The rural aspect, the counties have a whole new initiative that was not in 1.0 as well. Maybe one question that has been asked, and I don't have the answer, and you would, I assume. Allocation amongst East and West and Central Pennsylvania, how does that work through? Do you know, as far as the sort of the number of acreage or locations, could it all be in the West, hypothetically?
I think I would lose my job for that, but I think we're still
not putting you on the spot. Okay.
I did.
Yeah.
I did see
please.
that. I just read some recent stats. So of the 2.0, I believe you can select up to 25% of your census tracts.
Got it.
With a minimum of 25 census tracts. And then the recent stats I saw were that 25.5 of the census tract, 25.5% of the census tracts in Pennsylvania actually qualify. So I'm interested to see how it goes, but it seems like there's going to be a very thin kind of difference between census tracts that are eligible that aren't selected at the end of the day.
Oh, thanks, Bill. That's very helpful. All right, Lauren, the county is going to be working with the state on this?
Yes, definitely. And so we've already started conversations with Melissa and with the state about what this might look like this time around. I think there are strengths we can build off of after, I'll continue calling it OZ 1.0. One of the challenges in working with government and county government can just be understanding what resources we do provide. And so we had, created some marketing materials, a website that specifically showed where there were zones and what other layered incentives or programs that the county offers that could be paired and utilized within those tracks. And so we are planning to update that and to make that information as clear as possible once we have those designated zones. But even before that, I think we're taking the same approach that the state is, and it's really demonstrative of how we're looking at economic development across Allegheny County at this point. We are underway in a lot of planning, which means that's giving us a lot of rich data that we can use to inform these recommendations and decisions like this. So we are underway in our comprehensive plan. We are doing a housing needs assessment within the county to look at what housing across income thresholds and typology is needed and where, and also doing a scan of the land use policy in each of these municipalities. And so as we think about where we need to see investment and want to see investment across housing or specific sector growth and in targeted geographies, we're going to be able to pull a lot of that data to look at where there's already a clustering of investment, but also communities that are ready for that investment, that have updated zoning policy, or where we might be able to work with them and provide some technical expertise to think about what that census tract looks like and what it could be ready for. And so we'll be using all of that data in addition to, we work closely with the state and we're able to look at where there have been requests for funding, be it the sites fund, multimodal transportation funding, just in thinking about where is there already investment and how can we build upon that. I'm also joined by my colleague, James Reed. He's over there, if you haven't met him yet. He works in the county executive's office and is the deputy chief of staff for policy. And so we are thinking about those local tax incentives or other programs that we could apply here. So we have a tax abatement program that is quite dated. We haven't updated that policy and program in quite some time. And so there was recently, we worked with the city of Pittsburgh and some of the folks in the room and with the school district to create a buy right program for downtown. We're looking at how can we make that a program that's a bit easier. So creating a program that municipalities and school districts can opt into, for example, through a streamlined application and process. That requires a lot of education, a lot of capacity building in communities, but that's all the work that we're looking forward to and that we already have underway.
Great, thank you. So maybe I'll go back to Bill for a second. And when you're out and looking and your fund is looking for sites, criteria as far as size, obviously there's a critical mass that we would need to provide if we could get you to invest in Pittsburgh and not necessarily in another location. What would be sort of your suggestion for that?
Yeah, there's definitely a few different ways to go about doing it, right? So it really spans the full gamut of just investment in general, but you can do smaller scale projects. Us personally, just given our investment strategy, we target institutional level investment. So finding sites that are getting you to a scale that will provide interest to an institutional fund. So there are funds that are raised by your more traditional capital solutions, but where we're seeing a lot of success on kind of the capital raising from an OZ perspective is just with RIAs or other kind of investment leaders who are aggregating a decent amount of capital gains coming in, raising those funds, and then deploying from there. So our most recent project was capitalized through an RIA, so a bunch of different investors coming into that project. And the feedback I have been getting with the 2.0 program is the deferral. Everybody's very happy the deferral's 5 years instead of a hard deadline, which it was. I don't know if everybody's aware, but there's a deadline of your tax deferral on OZ 1.0 of December of 26. So the longer you went into this period, the less that incentive was available. Whereas the 2.0, I believe that they're saying that that's 5 years from whenever that investment occurs. But yeah, the institutions obviously they want to put out larger checks, and that's generally how that works. But that's not to say that there are capital gains available, and I do think that there are opportunities on an individual basis to get those capital gains deployed for smaller projects as well.
Good. That's very helpful. I think that the point on that too is that this isn't just for local developers. This is for major funds that aggregate people that had those capital gains and institutions that are putting it in, that are looking all over the country, and they look at our region like they look at any place else. What's the best rate of return? And they will be here if it makes sense, and they'll go elsewhere if it doesn't. So we want to make sure we work with that. So. Terrific. So I think maybe we should probably stay with this a little bit by asking the question, and maybe with Melissa and Lauren, what can we do as a group to help you in this process with regards, and I say we, the collective NAIOP, but also the real estate industry. There are places that, ultimately, it clearly is a public official decision, but at the same time, if there's ideas and ways that we can be at the table, and I would say, just to give another shout out to the local chapter here, to have Lauren on the board is a fantastic thing. That's something that I don't think I've ever seen before, and it's a tribute to Lauren, but also to the county executive and to the administration. So I want to compliment them on that, because that's, again, the communication is so important. But going forward, what are there places that this group can help you all on that?
Sure. Yes. So we have already started looking at, as Melissa said, the map. So there is specific eligibility criteria. We are working to create our own maps, and those are. There will be the map from the Treasury. We are looking at where we know there's a 70% median family income eligibility piece, and where there are communities with 20% of families at the poverty line. We know that those census tracts would be eligible. And so we want to share that information with you so that you know which communities we think will be eligible, and understand if you're already looking at projects in those sites. We're also going to be collecting, is there a pipeline of projects there? Educating the municipalities, meeting with municipalities, and meeting with developers and property owners in those places as part of a lot of the planning that we're doing and the focused conversations that we're having across the county to understand what opportunity exists. But we want to hear from you. So we've already heard from developers that are a bit nervous. We know that the eligibility criteria has changed. So it went from 80% AMI to 70% AMI, and that means that some census tracts may fall out now of eligibility, and those developers are reaching out to say, what does this mean? Is this census tract still going to be in there? We want to have those conversations with you. If you have questions, if you have concerns, please contact me directly. Also, we are thinking about how we redefine a lot of the programs and the tools that we offer. So our redevelopment authority, has an economic development fund. That's a revolving loan fund. We are thinking about how we can specifically allocate some of those resources that could be layered in these specific communities and to support projects that exist in opportunity zones. And we need to understand how you need to pencil out your projects and like what could be a good gap product that we could offer through some of the resources that we have. I'll also add that a lot of the census tracts that will be eligible are also the census tracts that we're able to invest in with a lot of the federal funds and state funds that we receive. And so while we're talking about, how the Opportunity Zones program is somewhat strengthened through this bill, there are other tools that are really important for us to create the conditions that will retain and attract investment. Some of those are community development block grants, the home funding. That allows us to provide subsidy to housing projects. That allows us to multifamily residential projects. That allows us to fix stormwater, sewer projects, street repaving, the things that will make these opportunity zones that much more attractive. And so it's really important that that we make sure that we continue to receive those resources so that we can bundle those really around the projects that will exist in these zones.
That's a great word, bundling. And all the, as Bill mentioned earlier, it can't stand on its own if it's just a non-marketable. So, Melissa, is there other items on the state side that we can help and assist with the process?
I think Lauren honestly hit it all. Having those conversations with Lauren will be so important, particularly to understand what's already in the pipeline, and for whatever reason doesn't work, you lose funding, et cetera, if those tracks are not designated. Those are things that are important for us to know as we consider the tracks that will be designated. So make sure that those conversations are happening, and echo everything else that she said as well.
Great, okay. Well, why don't we move to the second stage here, and I'm going to open maybe with Eric and talk a little bit about some of the other aspects of the tax bill that came out this summer and its impact on real estate and things that we should be aware of that we may not. I mean, obviously some of the high-level things we all know about, but there are quite a few details in there that NAIOP National is aware of. And
yeah, sure. Well, we'll see. The bill permanently extends 199A, that 20% tax or deduction for pass-throughs. That was a pretty big fight, honestly, because there was some work, or there was some discussion that you'd have a higher top end rate. So there was some negotiating where that 20% would fall, and if it was going to survive. I mean, I would say that, I think as you pointed out earlier, a big part of what we do is on federal lobbying is prevent bad ideas from getting into legislation. So sometimes the successes we're able to keep a lot of this existing law going forward and continuing it, but then there was a lot of bad ideas that were kind of creeping in to pay for it that we had to spend a lot of our time on. New market tax credits are made permanent in the bill. There's also one of the things you might want to think about that this did come up, condominium construction taxes accounting. So originally, I think the way that it was explained to me that you had to start paying taxes on a percentage of the completed or proposed condominiums. Now that you're not taxed until they're all sold. So that was a value. And then, the REIT taxes. I'm sorry, there's so many. It's such a big bill.
No,
if there's something specific
right.
in it,
Right.
to know exactly what the value is, I would say that would
time
be,
will tell with some of these things
right.
too. Right.
So, exactly. You might want to be mindful that one of the things that were ended in the legislation was the clean energy tax credits. That came in late in I want to say 21. We're part of the the Inflation Reduction Act. Wind and solar projects are getting phased out, and you need to have, there's a 5% safe harbor. So if you have those projects going, you need to get that construction started and those investments made now, because there's a real incentive from IRS to get that moved on past that.
Okay. All right. Melissa, I know we've touched on some other programs, but are there other state programs that you'd like to discuss for this community here? And then,
yeah, I think we mentioned PA sites already, but that has been like a really one big investment to DCD, and I think has been really key in terms of getting parcels that aren't quite ready and mitigating some of that risk on the front end. Just thinking about like financing strategic investments across the Commonwealth to effectively compete for funding. So I think that's one. And then there are a couple others through the CFA that I think our Commonwealth Financing Agency that have been mentioned, but are also really key to kind of making projects pencil out. So those would be like our multimodal transportation fund, which can be used for some of the like streetscaping pieces, and then our mixed use revitalization program as well. Also administered through our Commonwealth Financing Agency that provides grants and loans for mixed use development. And then the last one that I think I would mention, and I think it might have already been mentioned, is PA Small Water and Sewer is another one that kind of helps with those like last pieces. It's for water, sewer, stormwater, and flood control projects, capped at about $500,000. I think those are the really big ones that I've seen folks use to really help the math work on projects.
great, thank you. And Lauren, I know you've touched on many of them, but others you'd like to add to, just for?
Sure, I mentioned the LRTA tax abatement program, so that's something that's available. There's information on our website. Some, it varies within municipalities whether the school district or the municipality participates and at what level, but we're always happy to work through those. We can provide direct financing, so our redevelopment authority, we do have an economic development fund, so we can make patient, very low interest with flexible terms financing available for site development or to businesses that are expanding and growing to finance equipment, machinery, construction costs. We can grant funds, so I mentioned the importance of those community development block grants and some of that federal funding. We're able to grant that to projects where we see significant job creation, specifically in low to moderate income census tracts or for those individuals. And so those resources do exist, and we apply those to projects. We have some local funds, so there are recording fees that actually create a demolition fund for the county. So if you have a site or a project that requires funding for and you need demolition funding, we have that program, and that application I think is still open. We always have funds available for emergency demolition as well, and then affordable housing development. And so we have local funds, and then we utilize state and federal funds to support the development of affordable housing across the county. And a lot of the time we provide the subsidy to the developers that are utilizing the low-income housing tax credit program, which, through the bill, there was an increase in tax allocation and more streamlined application process and some more flexibility within that program. And so we can support those projects as well. And as I said, we are working to kind of define what new programs might look like. So we just encourage your feedback.
Great, good. And maybe Bill, I know your company has worked here in Western Pennsylvania, but also elsewhere. Are there ideas that you've seen that have worked, that are economic incentives that this region could potentially utilize?
I don't think there's too much of a wide breadth of opportunities out that are different than what's going on here. I do think Pennsylvania, and particularly the current administration, is doing a great job of having all these programs, and does a great job in general, particularly on the brownfield side. We're well ahead of most other states as it relates to brownfield and the incentives related to that. But what we do see, particularly in the Southeast and some other areas that are experiencing kind of this rapid growth, is just the speed at which a lot of these incentives can come to fruition, whether that's a tax abatement or a grant program. So I do think the current administration has done a great job of helping to speed that process up. We've experienced it firsthand. That's generally it, is just the speed and the opportunity to help get those programs in place to facilitate development in a timely manner.
Right, and I'll just comment on a few. I mean, certainly when you talk to some other states, that's sort of the one-stop shop, and I think the governor's administration is working very well in the county, but that isn't one where that we can always improve on. That when an out-of-town developer comes in, that they don't have to go to 4 or 5, and the city as well, they'd say the same thing, that there's someone that sort of holds their hand through it, and as long as it's a legitimate project that makes sense, that the government makes that commitment to work through it and to make sure they understand the challenges and you know, the different steps that they have to make, and there's a sense of certainty is the other thing I would say. That's the second one, that it's when you deal with certain areas, you want to know that it may be very difficult to develop in a certain area, but there's a 7 or 8 steps, and if they do that, they know they're going to get the approval, whereas other areas, sometimes it can be challenging because you don't know, and suddenly someone comes in from left field and you're on step 4 and the whole thing goes sideways, and that really discourages developers on that side as well. And then I think the RCAP is one where it's a wonderful program, but I can tell you, having worked with some outside tenants and large corporations, it makes a lot of sense for RCAP, and I can't really answer many questions about it because I don't know when the next step is, I don't know when the approvals will happen, and it's very challenging. And they say, you know, in other states, if they have a certain job criteria, creation figure, things happen. So it's sort of a sense, again, maybe it goes back to that term of certainty, and that, and we want to make sure also, I would add, is that I think we want to make sure that, you know, this region is open to outside capital coming in, and that's another important thing, that it is not just a sort of the network of those of us who have been here for a long time know how to work the system. It shouldn't be that way. We want to make sure, I like competition because I think it elevates the entire region, and we want to make sure that everyone has that opportunity, and they don't say, when you go to Western Pennsylvania, it's very hard to maneuver, and we don't know quite how to make that work, and that's the other aspect. So, if anyone would like to make any more comments, we can go to Q&A. I don't have any questions in here, by the way, so if I don't know if the technology is working, or if not, we can just do it. People can. Any other comments before, please?
I'll just add,
please.
You know, our partners at the Urban Redevelopment Authority, you know, they are also looking for a pipeline of projects related to the new market tax credit allocation. And so if you have projects and you think that that is a source of funding or a program that you want to engage in, you know, reaching out to the URA, to Tom Link, to Becky Davison-Wagner, that they have a great team, and they're also thinking creatively about how they can apply those tools. And so when, you know, we often speak about the county and not the city of Pittsburgh, when because there is a URA and an Urban Redevelopment Authority, but should mention that they're able to work throughout the county as it relates to that new market tax credit program. So.
Right, and I'll just add too, Elmhurst had a project in the city and was involved with the URA throughout, and it was an exceptional experience in the sense that the person who was in charge, and again, we sort of had someone in charge, she's now the executive director of it, but when it passed, it was like a victory for her as well, and that really made you feel good that they want this to happen and make it work, and I'll never forget that. That was about 5 years ago, but that's very important. I don't have any questions, but maybe we can do this verbally, and please.
I tried to submit a question on the thing.
No worries, go ahead. Do we have a mic?
This is a question for Lauren, and it is, what is the county's plan to start doing regular tax reassessments?
That is the question we get the most often. So it is something that is front of mind, I think, for the county executive, for county council, and for all of us that are working in this space. There is a governmental committee that was just pulled together. That is going to be a focus of that committee and thinking about what that looks like. And I know that the county executive is working closely with the state legislature around state policy that might look at legislating the frequency of which the reassessments have to happen. But there is a lot of work being done. We wanted to make sure that there was loop legislation in place as well, so legislation to protect longtime homeowners in the county before reassessments could move forward, but something that we continue to work on, and I'm happy to follow up with you with more detail offline.
Quick follow-up question on that. Why not just use the county's in-house data team and open source automated valuation methods to just do it annually and cheaply and accurately every year? Allegheny County is the largest municipality in the country that doesn't do regular reassessments. That means new construction faces a much higher tax rate here than it does basically anywhere else in the country.
I think that is a great idea, and something that the team is considering as they explore how to move forward with that. And that's something I can certainly take back to the various agencies and departments that are working on it within the county. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Other questions? Great group. Yep.
This may be appropriate for Melissa. There's a kind of a site selection element to opportunity zones. We're probably looking at census tracts, but maybe brownfields within that census tract as an opportunity. Where we have issues with power delivery, with DEP not being on the same page. I'll give a shout out to the office of David Wade's office. He's been very helpful. I can't remember thank you, Office of Transformation. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But is there an opportunity for all of these agencies to come together on some of these sites to promote and sort of identify what those trips might be, coming in, whether it be brownfields or power delivery or we're gonna have some hurdles to clear on some of these sites, and I'd like to hear if the state is prepared and to market these sites appropriately from that vantage point.
That's good. Melissa?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. She asked
I think the question maybe I could do real quick is the state have plans for backfilling, so to speak, making sure that some of these future opportunity zone sites will have the infrastructure to be able to be developed? Is that fair? Okay.
Yeah.
And the programs that the state might have with regards to roads, sewer, water, other infrastructure.
Yeah, so I heard parts of the question, so thank you for repeating it. I neglected to say that, we have been thinking about pieces like brownfield remediation, et cetera. There is funding that also exists at the state for some of that work already. Brownfield remediation is something that we have certainly been thinking about. With regard to, was the second piece like interconnection power supply?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Those are both pieces that we've been thinking about a little, obviously, both important to making a site ready for development. We haven't finalized the strategy there, but they are both pieces of what the strategy is that we're thinking about, and how do we make sure that things are fully ready to receive investment and that we really make the most of this opportunity that's been put in front of us. But thank you for bringing that up and just emphasizing that we are on the right track with how we're thinking about some of this and what's important to the folks who are on the ground and will be taking advantage of these OZs.
I would add too, and I want to go back to Bill's comment about path of progress too, and that certainly should be looked at in the sense of where are we in 2035 and what sites would be the most applicable, and there's almost a triage part of it, but that's an important aspect that dovetails into where you're going to put those improvements. So a question?
Morning, everybody. Thanks, panel. This has been great information. Not a question, but more so a comment to share about perspective with using this tool. So with opportunity zones, you can invest in qualified opportunity zone business property. So I know that we are primarily focused on real estate development, but for tenants that you may have that are taking on big expansions as well, opportunity zones becomes a tool that could also layer into their capital raises. So don't forget that.
Thank you. That's very important. Great addition. Other comments? Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you to the panel. Great. Very nicely done. And thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate all of your time. No other announcements. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again for coming.